الثاني رئيس مجلس إدارة شبكة الجزيرة الموقر، السيد الدكتور مصطفى صواق مدير شبكة الجزيرة وكالة، السادة المسؤولين، السيد كمال خرازي وزير خارجية إيران السابق ورئيس مركز الدراسات الاستراتيجية للعلاقات الدولية في إيران، الحضور الكريم، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أهلا وسهلا بكم في هذه الندوة التي
To welcome you at this symposium where we host Dr. Kamal Kharrazi to talk about the foreign policies of Iran, the foundation thereby, and the trends, as well as the milestones. We are living through the 40th anniversary of the Iranian Revolution. Indeed, the famous revolution in 1979, which affected the region, it had its own slogans, its own ambitions, and its own implications, obstacles, and encounters. And indeed, regionally speaking, we've seen certain complications, certain discrepancies. We want to talk about the motivations for what took place inside Iran. However, we would like for Dr. Kamal Kharrazi, who lived by the Iranian foreign policy, who was an insider, who was also between 1997 and 2005 the foreign minister, and he is of heavy weight, if I might say, in politics, and he knows the supreme leader, he knows the president, he knew the parliamentarians, and he personally was an insider in such encounters. Would like for him to touch upon these details in an open kind of manner in order to understand what took place in Iran for the last 4 decades, especially when it comes to its foreign relations thereby. So if the geographists said in the past that this is the umbilical cord of the world, indeed geopolitics says this again when it comes to obstacles, ambitions, as well as challenges. We would like to welcome you, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Fatma Smadi from the Al Jazeera Center for Research will be hosting the gentleman, His Excellency. Please come along. Thank you.
In the name of God, the most compassionate, the most merciful, may the peace and blessings of God be upon his prophets and his companions. With the success of the Iranian Revolution 4 decades ago, the one or the two pillars that have been toppled by the Islamic Revolution and establishing a new methodology of relationship between the United States of America and Iran. And this new methodology of relations has imposed its presence in the region when it comes to all international and regional relations, including the relationship between Iran and Saudi Arabia and also the countries of the region. And when we talk about regional cooperation, this has a number of parameters that should be taken into account and a number of requirements as well. Also, there are a number of challenges and problematics that should be taken into account when we talk about regional cooperation, which is the topic of our discussion tonight. That means main and important thorny issues, including the Yemeni dossier, the Syrian dossier, in addition to other problematic issues such as the relationship between the United States of America and Iran. Our guest tonight is a political renowned personality when it comes to foreign relations, and as it was introduced by Dr. Mohammed, he was a former Minister of Foreign Affairs during the Khamenei administration for 8 years. This was the era where we saw the Dialogue of Civilizations, and also he is also the chair of the Strategic Council on Foreign Relations that was established by resolution by the supreme leader in Iran to give a new dimension to foreign relations in Iran. Dr. Kamal Kharrazi is an academic and also a university professor. I would like to invite him to talk about regional cooperation prospects and challenges. Thank you, Doctor.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Your Excellency, Sheikh Ahmed Al-Thamir, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very delighted today to be in Doha and speak in this August Institute. I hope that this meeting could be a good opening for further cooperation between us, so that we could also contribute effectively to the expansion of relations between Iran and Qatar, as well as regional peace and security. Today, we are living in a world which is experiencing a long transitional period of disorder and ensuing chaos. Liberalism, which claims to be presenting the last and best solution for governance, is grappling with serious challenges and problems. On the other side, capitalism has gone so far in exploiting the world that the number of the poor and the hungry people across the globe has reached the border of crisis and danger. Our region, in particular, is now in a long crisis after the pull-out of colonialists from the region. The Zionist entity was established in the occupied territories of Palestine as a seed of dissension and division, and a new era of foreign intervention in the guise of new colonialism and support for Zionist regime and dictator rules. Our region has experienced a lot of wars, and in the recent decades, the Arab Spring, which was expected to cause deep awakening and development in this region, reached a dead end, with the intervention of foreigners and their agents creating deep political splits. As a result, more serious geopolitical rivalries were formed in the region, and the friends of yesterday turned enemies, and enemies became friends. The Saudi-led military intervention in Egypt, Libya, Bahrain, Syria, and Yemen, and more recently, the Saudi efforts to deny the sovereignty of one of its allies, Qatar, under the excuse of non-submission to Saudi hegemonic policies, are some of the examples of post-Arab Spring era. Such interventionist and hostile measures resulted in nothing but the destruction of national assets and infrastructure, planting the seed of hostility among the countries of the region, and eruption of war and bloodshed. Dear friends, such policies continued to be adopted by them to form political, intelligence, security, and even military cooperation with the Zionist regime against their big brother, Iran. Under such circumstances, the United States, which has always been seeking to fish in the troubled waters, intensified with the cooperation of the Zionist regime its campaign of Iranophobia, which has panicked the Saudi coalition so much stronger that in order to gain the US backing, the Saudi regime wasted hundreds of billions of dollars of its reserves to Americans. Such illusionary neurophobia resulted not only in the plunder of the wealth of Arab states, but also it produced the normalization of their relations with the Zionist regime. One such activity is the upcoming meeting in Poland, which seeks to not only counter Iran, but also Russia, as they are preparing the ground to set up their missiles against Russia in Poland as the host of this conference. However, what is related to Iran is that countries participating in Warsaw Conference to support the US anti-Iran policies cannot escape our attention. Those who became united due to their dependence and shortage of political insight with the foreigners and enemies of Islam against their Muslim brothers and sisters should be aware that such dangerous policies may turn into a crisis which can engulf themselves, as well should they continue such behavior and lack of insight. Ladies and gentlemen, if we can agree that our region is in very critical conditions, we should also agree on this belief that in order to attain peace and security in the region, there is no way but to develop contacts, dialogue, and respect to each other's sovereignty. Of course, the countries of the region are in need of self-belief and political insight before any other thing. This means they need to build up self-confidence and maintain political independence through intra-regional dialogue with a view to removing differences. Political awakening and insight are produced when we firmly believe in our strengths as Muslim countries and know that foreign countries, whatever may be strong, would not succeed to impose their will on us against the power of faith of the people of this region. You can see the miracle of faith and self-confidence in Iran, a country whose life during the Shah period was dependent on the foreigners, and in spite of enjoying the support of the foreigners, failed to survive against a popular movement of people who were equipped with the power of faith. With reliance on faith power, the Islamic Republic of Iran managed to survive despite many vicious plots, such as attempt for coup, 8 years of war, sanctions, and political pressures by the foreigners. In light of faith and self-confidence, the Islamic Republic of Iran has taken a lot of successful steps towards economic, political, defense, scientific, and technological development. The Islamic Republic of Iran, in spite of all of these conspiracies, is today the most stable country in this turbulent region. Iran is not dependent on any power in defending its identity and national interests. Without a doubt, such an independent and self-reliant power, being a pioneer in science and technology, is indeed inspiring for other nations, leading to Iran's natural and spiritual influence in the region. Iran in recent centuries has never, ever started a military assault on the soil of others, but has not spared any efforts in defending the stability of other countries in the region. Is a spiritual influence and being inspiring for others a crime or sin? Today, we need a strong region in which all countries could rely on their own capabilities and assist each other through dialogue and understanding to foster peace and stability in the region. In this respect, the Islamic Republic of Iran is prepared for talks and cooperation with all the countries of the region and provide them with its 40 years of experience of self-reliance and sufficiency. Dear friends, we consider a special respect for Qatar as our neighbor. Although some of its policies are not compatible with the policies of the Islamic Republic of Iran, what is commendable here is the resistance of this country against the political pressure and sanctions of Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates. Of course, the Islamic Republic of Iran, like supporting all the other independent countries of the region, opened the sky to enable them to break its air siege and supplied the needs of its people. Iran went to the rescue of Qatar because we believe that no country should consider itself as the hegemon power of the region. Bullying, extorting, and interference in the domestic affairs of the neighbors, and questioning the sovereignty rights of the others is never acceptable. On such a basis, Iran helped the people of Syria and Iraq, upon the request of their governments, against terrorists and played a significant role in eradicating them, as it considers interference in the domestic affairs of other countries and changing their governments through aiding terrorist groups are against the Sharia of Islam and international law. Now, the question arises here. After years of crisis and conflict in the region, in view of long policies, what is the solution and how can we overcome the current challenges? In my view, what is needed in the first hand is political insight and self-reliance. Circumstances of our region today requires that countries in the region, irrespective of their type of governments or internal policies, and considering the realities on the ground, sit together and make a collective decision to guarantee peace and stability without the interference of the foreigners. Distinguished colleagues, our region is unique in terms of its heritage and civilization, as well as the innate talent of its people and God-given resources. Our region is the inheritor of the great Islamic civilization. What the Western countries were relying on for centuries and translating their scientific books to get familiar with the state-of-the-art science of those days. One of our main duties today as the countries of the region is to help revive such a great civilization. We are duty-bound to make our efforts in reconstructing the Islamic civilization again to meet today's conditions. Our talented youth and luminaries sufficiently merit to be the world's pioneers of science and technology. Signs of such leadership can be clearly located in the universities of our region, especially in the Islamic Republic of Iran. Iranian scientists have succeeded without the support of other countries to reach self-sufficiency in defense capabilities, as well as nuclear technology for peaceful purposes. Such accomplishments are so much impressive that have taken Western scientists by surprise. In order to commemorate the Islamic civilization and return to the era of strength, Muslim countries have no alternative but to spend their God-given wealth on developing science and technology and enhance their scientists' capabilities to ultimately pave the way for our strength and development. You can imagine if financial resources had been utilized for the expansion of science and technology instead of war and bloodshed, what could have been the status of our region today? Dear friends, we should ultimately begin our work from somewhere. The Islamic Republic of Iran is prepared to cooperate with Qatar and other countries of the region in this respect. Iranian and Qatari universities can pursue joint projects, exchange students and professors, and support knowledge-based companies and startups. As I am personally involved in one of the new brand scientific fields called Cognitive Science and Technologies, and had been in charge of Iran's Cognitive Science and Technologies Council for years, I'm very much hopeful that with the cooperation of Iranian and other countries' scientists, we would be able to take reliable and effective steps towards developing such new knowledge and technology which can greatly impact the lives of all humans. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kamal Kharrazi. I'm going to give myself the opportunity to pose a question before I open the floor for the distinguished guests with us here today. Dr. Kharrazi, since the beginning of the Islamic Revolution, there were a number of priorities when it comes to the foreign policy in Iran. So she's going to reformulate the question, please. We kindly ask the... Okay, she's going to pose the question. As you know, sir, since the beginning and the success of the Iranian Revolution, Islamic Revolution, this has imposed a number of priorities when it comes to the foreign policy of Iran. After 4 decades, are the priorities still as they used to be during the first decade of the revolution? Or due to internal and external challenges, we have seen a change in terms of the priorities? For instance, Iran is focusing on the internal affairs now. Are these priorities different depending on the Iranian president, who, whether he is from the reformist party or from the Usuli or the moderate kind of party? What is your opinion on that? Are the priorities still as they are, as they used to be at the beginning 4 decades ago? Go ahead, sir.
Yes, as a matter of fact, the priorities has not changed because the Constitution of Iran dictates these priorities. According to the Constitution of Iran, foreign policy of Iran is led by the leader of Islamic Republic, and the Strategic Council on Foreign Relations, in that sense, helps the leader to formalize those policies. According to the Constitution of Iran, internally, our first duty has been for social justice, to give the wealth of Iran, which is eminent, to the whole Iranians, not in the hands of specific people. In that sense, we have spent a lot of efforts and money on developing rural areas. At this stage, 80% of rural areas have access to gas, electricity, internet, roads, and water, drinking water. And if you compare the situation of rural areas right now with before revolution, you can understand that how much difference has happened, how much development has happened. And in terms of education, according to the Constitution, we have been obliged to invest a lot on education. Right now, 97% of Iranians are literate. The number of students at the universities have grown to 4 million students, while it was before revolution something like 170,000. The number of universities have reached to more than 2,500 universities, large universities and small universities all around the country. In terms of many other developments, in terms of roads, the number of norms in terms of kilometers have been reached many times. In terms of transportation, in a sense, one of our duties have been to distribute money among people in terms of social justice. The women have now great responsibilities in Iran. The number of girls who are entering the universities is more than 60%. They are ahead of boys. And responsibilities at different levels, in companies, in a governmental level, is raising very quickly. That number of ladies who are taking responsibility, are improving.
Despite all that, we have a complaint from Iranian women who use an expression and say that the high-profile kind of positions are not enjoyed by women, but only men. So this is a complaint that we have in Iran, although the situation position of women has advanced and developed.
As well, the Constitution dictates that we have to support those who are under pressure. We have to support friendly country if is invaded. And that is exactly why we rushed to the help of Iraqi government and Syrian government, because they invited us to go there and help them against terrorist groups. We, according to the Constitution, have to fight against imperialism. And right now, unfortunately, United States is resorting to financial imperialism. If in the past they occupied territories and were there by the presence of their military equipment, right now by their financial power are imposing their will on everywhere. The policies of Mr. Trump not only has troubled Iran, but has troubled everyone, even Europeans as the allies of the United States. So whatever Iran has been doing in terms of foreign policy, in terms of internal policy, has been dictated by the Constitution of Iran. And there is no way to change unless the Constitution would be changed. Mm-hmm. And therefore, in responding to your question, the policies of Iran has been since revolution the same, and still we are obliged according to the Constitution to follow the same.
نعم شكرا جزيلا. سأفتح
Thank you very much. I'm going to open the floor for questions and answers and interventions. We would like to ask the dear guests to ask their questions and represent themselves, and we would like the questions to be up to 1 minute, 1.5 minutes. I would like to start with the gentleman, and then I'll give the floor to Mr. Maysara.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. I'm Dr. Zia from Kulliyat John bin Jassim. Sir, Iran is a brave country and it follows an independent foreign policy. It is seen active in Yemen, Syria, and the GCC crisis. But of late, it is seen very silent in Afghan affairs. Can you please explain Iran's position on current Afghan peace process? Thank you.
Mr. Maysara, we're going to take 4 to 5 questions and then we're going to give the floor to Dr. Kamal Kharrazi. My name is Mr. Maysara from Jordan, an activist from Jordan. I'm going to talk about the opinion of the Arab street. There is a bad position that they think that Iran is advanced and they consider it the first enemy in this ummah. And we have seen approval and acceptance for such a position. We know how much the United States of America feeds that and how this animosity aims to achieve divisions and to create unrealistic enemies. So how can Iran reunite the Islamic Ummah? What is taking place now is very scary indeed. And I do think that the main responsibility is shouldered by Iran because it is the strongest country. It is the country that has a project, that has a hegemony, whereas the other Arab countries, particularly in this divide between Shia and Sunnah, is in a very difficult situation. So Iran is the one that shoulders the greatest responsibility. There are some people who look at Iran and look at his military and militias that have killed people here and there through their interventions. I think that Iran, and this is a question, what is the project of Iran to change the image that we have and to enter positively into the Islamic world and the Arab world? Thank you so much. We're going to take another question and then we're going to give the floor to Dr. Kamal Kharrazi. Taha Hussein from Al-Sharq newspaper. Dr. Kamal Kharrazi, you talked about the spiritual influence is not a crime. We have this sectarian problems that are taking place and ethnic cleansing that is taking place. This is a crisis and a crime, what is taking place also in Lebanon. So it is not an innocent spiritual kind of influence. What is your comment, sir? I would like to give the floor to Dr. Kamal Kharrazi. So we start with Afghanistan, and I would like to add to this question with regard to Afghanistan, taking into account the talks that are taking place. What is the position of Iran?
Yes, we have not kept silent on Afghanistan. In fact, we were very influential in Afghanistan in supporting Mujahideen of Afghani at the time that they were engaged with Taliban of those days. Unfortunately, when Americans came to Afghanistan, they rewarded us by being in excess of evil. But we have continued our cooperation with Afghani people, Afghani governments. Now, after 17 years of Americans' presence in Afghanistan, everyone has arrived to this conclusion that Americans' presence is useless, has not reduced bloodshed and killings, but has intensified killings. And therefore, even the Americans themselves have come to this conclusion that they have to negotiate with Taliban and come up with a new government in Afghanistan, that probably the problems will be resolved. We have been in contact with Taliban as with the government of Afghanistan and different parties in Afghanistan to follow the developments. And recently, a group of Taliban representatives came to Iran and talked to our authorities. Eventually, there should be some peaceful solution for Afghanistan. Therefore, we have not been silent, and we have been following the developments and have been trying our best to reduce the tension in Afghanistan. And we will follow the case as much as we can. On the question of public opinion and Iranophobia, yes, there are a lot of investment in the region to propagate Iranophobia. And Americans especially are pushing for Iranophobia. Why? Because as much as countries in the region would be afraid of Iran, the result would be more dependence of Americans and big powers, and to giving money to Americans to satisfy them. Mr. Trump has not been hiding his position, has been saying that if you want security, you have to pay for that. And once he said that if we take out our support from Saudi Arabia, they have to speak Persian in 2 weeks' time. That means they cannot survive without support of Americans. And Americans, to give support to Saudi Arabia, need their help, need their money. As in travel of Mr. Trump to Saudi Arabia, he signed agreements for $400 billion. And as a result of all of these policies, now the reserve of Saudi Arabia has been reduced from $750 billion to $300 billion, just by spending their money on nonsense, on useless wars. And this shows that the business of Iranophobia has been created to just impose their policy on some countries in the region and take their money in exchange of supporting for their security. What is important is that, of course, we are doing our best to fight with this Iranophobia, but naturally we have a lot of limitations. And with the amount of investment that Americans and others are putting on Iranophobia, public opinion are not aware of the realities. But one has to understand that in the long run, I believe Iran would survive. And public opinion would come up to this understanding that out of all of these scenarios were a fake. You remember during war of Iraq against Iran, many Arab countries here were supporting Saddam Hussein. But what was the end of the story? Saddam Hussein is gone and Iran is powerful. Now we are much more powerful than at the time of Saddam Hussein, without the support of anyone. I was in Tehran. There was an exhibition of military equipment developed by Iranian scientists. It was amazing that how much sophisticated military equipment, taking drones, taking helicopters, taking jet fighters, taking missiles, all kinds of missiles, have been developed internally without the support of any foreign country or foreign company. So out of those days, which everyone were against Iran, No one was supporting Iran during the war. Now we are more powerful and our enemies are gone. So don't hurry, just wait. This atmosphere would pass, and at the end of the story, you find that who has been right. And of course, we have to do our best to talk to the people, to fight with Iranophobia as much as we can. On Yemen and Lebanon, Lebanese people are poor people. But what they want is very simple. Houthis, who are representative of Zaidi population and constitute 40% of Yemen population, they want a share. They want a share in the government. That is what they're killing. They say any future government which has to be established out of negotiations of Yemeni, Houthis and Zaidis have this right to have a share. And Saudi Arabia, unfortunately, have been bombarding these poor people to the extent that a lot of people have been killed and many infrastructure have been destroyed without any result. Without any result. Even Americans have come to this understanding that continuation of this war is useless. Yeah, Iran has been trying to help Yemenis to survive in terms of human assistance and so on. In Lebanon,
Kharrazi, since we have come to the Yemeni dossier, if you allow me, and here you have referred to represent Zaidis and for them to take part in the power. Is this the title that we can say that Iran can support a political solution? Is this the formula that Iran wants to have Zaidis and to take part in the authority? Or is there another kind of vision for Iran for a political solution?
What you said, that we support them to arrive to their natural right, which is having share in any future government. Of course, that can be achieved by Yemeni negotiations without pressure from outside, without intervention of others. We have to prepare the ground for them to sit together, and that is why we supported the Swedish meeting. And we continue to support such an effort to come up to any resolution of the conflict in Yemen. On the question of Lebanon, why we have supported Hezbollah? Because Hezbollah has been fighting against occupiers. Hezbollah has been the party who pushed Israelis out of Lebanon. Arab countries like Egypt could not do that. Syria could not do that. But Hezbollah was able to push Israelis out of Lebanon. This does not mean that the threat of Israel has been ended. If Hezbollah would not be equipped as a party of Lebanon, certainly Israel would enter Lebanon as well. Again, all the pressures against Iran, that why you support Hezbollah, is for the sake of service to Israel, to give free hand to Israel to whatever they want to do. And certainly it is our responsibility to support. And again, you have to look at the end of a story. You find that Hezbollah has become more powerful on each stage. And right now is much more powerful than before, because they believe in Islam, they believe in God, and they believe that they have to struggle for a better life. I was in Lebanon 2 years ago, and I met Al-Ra'i, who is the religious leader of Maronites. And he himself said that if Hezbollah had not fought Daesh, Daesh could be in Lebanon to behead all of Christians, as they did that in Iraq and part of Syria. So Hezbollah has been serving even Christians in Lebanon, the Sunnis, the Shia, everyone. And therefore, Lebanese people are proud of having such a party who is part of the government and is doing your best to defend the national interest of Lebanon. And we as Iran have been supporting them, not by intervention in Lebanon. That is the job of Lebanese themselves, including Hezbollah party and other parties, to decide. Some people think that every day we are ordering Hezbollah what to do. This is not the case. They have matured enough to look after their own interests and to decide in time to whatever they have to do.
I would like to go back to Syria. The problematic that was posed with regard to Syria and was posed in two questions by two guests. The Arab world, or a large part of the Arab world, has a different narrative compared to what Iran says about Syria. And these differences in narratives entails that we can talk about the confrontation of takfiris. There are real demands in Syria. There is a real revolution that started peacefully. We cannot turn a blind eye to that. So Mr. Maysara talked about this different narrative. Iran does not try to revisit the reading of the narrative of what is taking place in Syria. So, talking about the decisiveness of what is taking place, is it for the bases upon which the Syrian revolution has taken place, even this internal conflict that is taking place, if we can call it so, internal conflict in Syria, although there are some international powers that have entered into this conflict? Doesn't Iran feel that there is a gap here between the two accounts that should be revisited, in your opinion?
Yeah, I agree that there are different positions in case of Syria, but we have to look to it much deeper. That why Syrian crisis started. I strongly believe that this was a plot drawn by Israelis, because eventually disintegration of Syria as a powerful government was in the interest of Israel. That is why Israel was supporting some of these terrorist groups by money and weapons, and this is very well established. Unfortunately, some of the countries were trapped by this policy and entered to the scenario of Syria to support terrorist groups. It is astonishing that in the matter of 2 weeks, yeah, this is true that first there were some demonstrations, but in the matter of 2 weeks,
It's a matter of months, not 2 weeks.
Pardon?
It's a matter of هي استمرت لأشهر وليس.
It took place for more than that.
No. What I mean is that in the matter of 2 weeks, they started to support groups and form terrorist groups. Daesh and Jabhat al-Nusra as two main terrorist groups could not be established without the support of foreigners. To be equipped, to have financial resources, and to take over most part of the Syria and many parts of Iraq. So there has been foreign support to these terrorist groups. And all of these have been at the service of Israelis to weaken the Muslim countries, to disintegrate the Muslim countries, and to give service to Israelis. Therefore, I believe it has to be looked to it very deeply. And I'm sure that in the future, after the crisis is over, there would be many documents around to show that who has been behind this crisis and why it happened and what has been the ultimate goal.
أعود إلى الأسئلة.
I'll come back to the ladies and gentlemen. The gentleman here, could you pose your question? And I would like you to introduce yourself before you pose the question, please. He's speaking in English. I am from the Center of Strategic Studies. Oh, he's back into Arabic. What are the factors? What are the factors that made Iran or helped Iran to expand during the last 4 decades in Lebanon, in Syria, in Yemen? Do you think that the Arab situation helped Iran to do so, or was it to do with the US intervention? This is the first question. The second question, please, if you could allow me. You have said that you cleave to the Constitution, you abide by the Constitution, but the Constitution has been put 40 years ago, and things have changed. Alliances were formed. So would it be possible perhaps to change the Constitution? Why you are adamant on keeping the Constitution as long as the things have changed already? Yes, please, another question. Thank you for it, Abdurrahman Kamil from the Strategic and Security Studies Center. I would like to ask a question regarding the religious factor in your policies, because you, doctor, have said that the priorities are still the same, but 4 decades later, I think the religious factor has led to certain problems. In Senegal, in Mauritania, in Morocco, we had problems. In Morocco, for example, the religious factor played a major role in 3 different diplomatic crises. So I would like to ask you about the religious factor and the justification of utilizing the religion as such. As you are the chair of the Strategic Council on Foreign Relations, would it be possible to comment on the religious factor, please? If you could allow me another question, please, and I'll come back to Dr. Kharrazi. Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you. Al-Quddus Al-Hashimi. I'm a PhD student. I would like to address Dr. Kamal and say that our position in the Arab world and our relationship with Iran perhaps is similar to the status quo here in our conference. There is a problem in communication. I think Dr. Kamal came along from Iran, from a Persian civilization. He's talking to us into English, and we are Arabs. Perhaps there is a missing link here, a communication link or gap that is presented here in the conference. And he is very calm, but we cannot understand this calmness when our hands are in fire. We are poor, yes, in Yemen and in Syria, but this poverty was not elbowed aside by Iran. As a matter of fact, Iran is supporting the Houthis, as everybody knows. And what about the Quds Brigade, as well as the ICRGs? This kind of strategy of communication won't get us nowhere, because the difference in power would compel us to sit and listen to kind of issues that we don't believe in. You are talking about Semitic civilization, but Iran has occupied 4 Arab capitals. So kind of your words have been falling on deaf ears. We cannot have Islamic civilization that is built on revenge, on vendetta, on an extremist ideology that tries to hegemonize the discourse. Thank you. The last question, I'll come back to Dr. Kharrazi. Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you. Saleh Hadid from Juan College. I'm a colonel. In chapter 10, article 150, it says the happiness of humans ought to be met. Independence, freedom, rule of law is, or are rather, rights for everyone. And as a matter of fact, the Islamic Republic support the disempowered against the boastful and those who have upper hand. However, it cannot interfere in the internal affairs of any country. So this is what the constitution is saying, but you have supported the Houthis, you have supported the Syrian regime, and this is considered an intervention. My question is, 4 decades later, we haven't seen your intervention in Israel. Why don't you support the disempowered in Palestine, especially when it comes to the Arabs who are living there? Thank you. So, Dr. Kharrazi, a lot of perhaps powerful questions. If you could answer, please.
Yes. The Constitution of Iran has been drawn 40 years ago after revolution. A revolution which was Islamic revolution, very genuine, and it was very different from other so-called revolution. When the Constitution is based on Islam, as we understand it in Iran, Islam does not change by time. The rules and laws of Islam are permanent. Therefore, it is true that Constitution had been drawn 40 years ago, but that does not mean that after 40 years the Constitution has to be changed, because the Islamic laws does not change. And we believe that the Constitution is basically based on Islamic laws and regulations. It is true that religious factors may be misused. I don't deny that. And if religious factors and principles have been misused in certain countries, that does not mean that everywhere when they talk about a religious state, that means that it is misused. It all depends on how you defend your constitution and principles. We believe in Iran that Islamic Republic, in spite of all of these pressures and atrocities, has tried to develop Iran for the benefit of Iranians. And that is why Iranians are supporting the Islamic Republic. And it is not easy to imagine that in spite of all of these pressures from Americans and others, Iran has been able to survive and to develop its self-confidence and self-reliance toward its own development. Therefore, the case in Mauritania or Senegal cannot be applied to Iran as a religious state. On the question that Iran is looking for its own power, And the accusation that Iran has been occupying 4 capitals, Arab capitals, this has to be substantiated. Where Iran has occupied Arab capitals? It is true that Iran has influence in many countries, being Arab country or non-Arab country, because Iran has been inspiring as a country that, without the support of foreigners, has been able to survive and develop. This is inspiring. As an independent country, has been inspiring for others. This is a natural and a spiritual influence, and nothing is wrong to have influence in other countries, a natural and a spiritual influence. Where Iran has occupied other capitals, this is nonsense. This is not acceptable. Who says that Iran has occupied? I tell you that it is a miracle that Iraqi people were engaged in 8 years of war with Iranians. But now these days, when Iranians go to Iraq, you find them so brotherly that they live together, they help each other. Why? Why? It is a miracle that even after so many destruction and war led by Saddam Hussein, now Iraqis understand that Iranians are helping them in terms of fighting with terrorist groups like Daesh. And therefore, this is not having influence by force, as some countries have tried to do by sending arms and money to terrorist groups. This is out of sacrifice that Iran has been doing to help people, and naturally is enjoying to have influence in other countries, including Arab countries. Why we support Houthis? Because we find them to be right. Saudi Arabia is violating the rights of Houthi people, is violating their rights by bombarding on a daily basis. It is the duty of everyone. It is the duty of every Muslim to support Houthis who are under pressure. We have been supporting not only Houthis, but we have been supporting Palestinians. Who says that we have not supported Palestinians? Always we have been supporting Palestinians, and Palestinians are not Shia. Palestinians are all Sunnis. We have supported them not to make them Shia, but we have supported them because they are under pressure of Israel. The lands have been occupied by Israelis. So as a matter of Islamic duty, we have been supporting them. And certainly we will continue to support them.
شكرا جزيلا.
باسمكم أشكر الدكتور كمال خرازي. Your behalf, I would like to thank Dr. Kamal Kharrazi, the chair of the Strategic Council on Foreign Relations. I would like to thank you and see you later, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.
And I have to congratulate Qataris for the Asian Cup.
خسته نباشید آقای دکتر.